They say that grief changes shape, but it never really leaves. For me, it took the form of paintbrushes and charcoal dust. My mother. She didn't just teach me how to see art. She taught me how to feel it. She saw colors where others only saw shadows. When she passed away, 4 years ago, I didn't just lose a parent. I lost my anchor. She left me one magnificent, impossible dream, the Beaumont Institute of Art. It wasn't just a college. It was a cathedral for creators, hidden away in New England. It was where she had always wanted to go, and it became the promise I made to her memory. Every late night, every blistered finger, every piece of my soul poured onto a canvas was for Beaumont, and for her. 3 years after the silence settled into our house, my father brought home Veronica. Veronica was everything my mother wasn't. Cool, polished, and perfectly curated. She was like a beautiful, expensive sculpture, breathtaking to look at, but utterly cold to the touch. Her clothes were always pressed. Her hair never had a strand out of place. She ran our home with the efficiency of a CEO managing a major corporation. My father, who was still navigating the unsteady waters of single parenthood and his own grief, seemed utterly captivated by her unwavering competence. She brought order to his chaos. To the outside world, she was the perfect stepmother. She remembered my birthday. She organized charity events. She always spoke of how proud she was of my artistic passion. But if you listened closely, her praise always carried a subtle, almost imperceptible edgy hint of condescension, a quiet reminder that my artistic life was merely a charming hobby, not a valid ambition. She never outright criticized me. Veronica was too clever for that. Her control was exercised through careful omission, through a subtle redirection of resources, and through a constant, low-level chill that settled between me and my father. She became the gatekeeper of his attention. The final word on all household decisions. My father was blind to it. Completely. He saw his second chance at happiness. A return to stability. He saw a woman who made his life easier. He simply didn't see the silent, subtle way she began to shrink my world. Then, the envelope arrived, thick, cream-colored, with the elegant seal of Beaumont. I remember the day perfectly. I grabbed the mail first, my heart drumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I sat on the porch swing, tearing the paper with trembling hands, and there it was, the glorious, validating, life-altering sentence. We are delighted to offer you a place in the incoming class of the Beaumont Institute. It was real. I had done it. I had kept my promise. I ran inside, screaming the news. My father beamed, pulling me into a bear hug. I always knew you would, sweetheart, he said, his eyes full of that old, unconditional pride. Veronica offered a small, composed smile. That is lovely. Dear, such a prestigious name. You should be very proud. The praise felt lukewarm, but in my euphoria, I barely noticed. The acceptance was the victory. The next day brought the confusing defeat. I was logged onto the Beaumont student portal, checking the financial aid package. My father had earned a very good living. We weren't rich, but we were certainly comfortable. I expected a moderate scholarship, some grants, and perhaps a loan to fill the gap. Instead, the screen was a blank slate of disappointment. $0 in institutional aid. $0 in federal grants. The package stated that based on the FAFSA and the documents submitted, our expected family contribution, the amount the college believed we could pay was high enough that I qualified for virtually nothing. It was a full pay offer, requiring hundreds of thousands of dollars, an amount that, even for us, would utterly cripple my father's retirement funds. I checked the numbers 3 times, my hands clammy. I was frozen, staring at the screen. The dream, which had been so close I could taste the canvas, was snatched away. It was an immediate, cold-water shock. Beaumont, without aid, was financially impossible. My father was confused and deeply upset. There must be an error. He kept insisting. I know our accountant filed everything correctly. We need to call them immediately. But Veronica, who just happened to be passing by the office door, stopped and gave a thoughtful frown. Honey, are you sure it's an error? She asked, her voice soft and sympathetic. You know, times are tight. The housing market is fluctuating. Perhaps the institute has simply tightened its requirements. It is a very expensive school, darling, perhaps too expensive for us right now. She suggested a sensible alternative, the local university, a perfectly fine place where I could still major in art, but which offered no challenge, no prestige, and certainly none of the magic of Beaumont, a place that felt like settling for a quiet life when my mother had always told me to reach for the stars. I felt a hollow ache settle in my chest. A terrible, familiar feeling of defeat. I hadn't been rejected, I had been excluded. And as I watched Veronica smoothly comfort my father, suggesting he call the local university instead of arguing with Beaumont. A tiny, venomous seed of suspicion planted itself deep inside me. I looked at that impossible number on the screen. Then at Veronicas.com. Placid face. My mother's dream was dead. And I had the terrifying, unspoken feeling that Veronica, the perfect, composed stepmother, hadn't just been standing by when it happened. I feared she had been the one to deliver the final, quiet blow. Suspicion is a slow-acting poison. It doesn't kill you outright, but it changes everything you see. After the Beaumont financial aid disaster, I tried to convince myself Veronica was right. Maybe it was just the economy. Maybe my father couldn't afford it. Maybe I was just being a dramatic, ungrateful teenager, blaming the easy target. I enrolled at the local university, swallowing the bitter pill of settling. But that quiet, venomous seed she planted in the office, it didn't die. It began to sprout roots. The first strange event I dismissed as bad luck. I had to follow up on a few remaining college files, transfer documents, final grades, things the local university needed. I kept them in a designated folder on my desk. One afternoon, I reached for it, and half the folder was gone. My transcripts, my letters of recommendation missing. When I searched frantically, I found them, not on my desk, but tucked away on the bottom shelf of the linen closet, mixed in with old towels. They weren't just misplaced. A few corners were crumpled, like someone had grabbed them in a hurry and shoved them where they didn't belong. I asked Veronica.com as always. "Oh darling, I was clearing the clutter in your room. I thought perhaps they were just old papers you didn't need anymore. I must have mistaken your desk for a temporary dumping ground." An innocent mistake, handled with a charming apology. Except, she never touched my room. She considered my artistic mess beneath her notice. Then came the portfolio prints. I needed professional prints of my best work for the local program's mandatory placement review. I spent a long, expensive afternoon at the print shop. I brought them home, carefully packaged and sealed. The next morning, I opened the tube. The prints inside were damp, not soaking wet, but enough that the ink had bled slightly, blurring the fine lines of my best charcoal portraits. They were subtly, undeniably ruined. I showed them to my father. He frowned, genuinely confused. "Where were you keeping them?" "Maybe near a window." I remembered putting them on the high shelf in the den, well away from any moisture. And who was the only other person in the house besides my father, who was at work all day? When I questioned Veronica, she gave me a look of genuine, injured surprise. "How awful. I did water the huge fern in the den yesterday morning. Perhaps some of the excess water dripped. I'm so sorry, sweetie. You know I have such a terrible green thumb." Her apologies were always perfect, sincere, self-deprecating, and just vague enough to be utterly useless. Each incident, on its own, was a minor accident. Together, they formed a pattern of deliberate, quiet carelessness aimed solely at my future. I felt like a character in a movie, watching the killer move behind a reflection in a mirror, always subtle. Always, deniable. The emotional distance from my father was the hardest part. The pressure of paying for 2 tuitions, mine, and a small executive course Veronica had suddenly decided to take had stressed him. Whenever I tried to talk to him about the issues with my documents, he would sigh, pinch the bridge of his nose, and say, "Can we just have some peace, please? Veronica is doing her best to help us all get organized." He didn't see me anymore. He only saw the tired man who needed the soothing efficiency Veronica provided. I was becoming an inconvenience, a source of stress in his new polished life. The breaking point wasn't a document or a ruined print. It was a hushed voice on a Tuesday afternoon. I was upstairs, folding laundry, a task Veronica delegated to me. Naturally, when I heard her speaking on the phone from the master bedroom balcony, her voice was low, almost a whisper. Completely unlike her usual authoritative tone. I stopped breathing, straining to hear, "No, you can't call me here. We agreed. Only the burner phone for the private meetings." Private meetings. My blood ran cold. This was not a conversation about PTA or charity auctions. She paused, listening intently, then spoke again, her voice softer, almost swooning. It was a tone I had never heard her use. It was intimate, affectionate, and utterly foreign coming from her guarded personality. "Yes, I know, but we have to be patient. I'm handling the transfer. The funds are secure in the secret account. Just a few more weeks, darling, and we can finally make our move." Secret account. Make our move. It wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't just about sabotaging my college plans. This was about a complete, hidden life she was building, a life that sounded like it required money, discretion, and a definitive exit strategy. The perfect stepmother wasn't just controlling my house, she was planning to abandon it. The suspicion that had been a tiny seed instantly bloomed into a terrible, undeniable truth. Veronica was hiding something enormous from my father, and if she was capable of such a sweeping deception, then sabotaging my financial aid package, destroying my dreams, was merely a small, necessary cost of doing business. I was no longer hunting for evidence of minor sabotage, I was now hunting for the key to her entire secret life. And suddenly, the thought of the local university didn't seem like the worst thing in the world. It meant I was still close enough to watch her, and wait. Once you know a secret exists, you can't unknow it. The low, affectionate murmur of her voice on the phone, the mention of the private meeting, and the secret account, shredded the last remnants of my naive faith in Veronica. I wasn't dealing with a careless stepmother. I was dealing with a spy in my own home, someone actively plotting a double life. Possibly at my father's expense. My focus shifted completely. I stopped caring about the ruined prince. All I cared about was finding proof. I didn't want to just expose an affair. I needed to understand why she had bothered to sabotage me in the first place. My college life, her secret life, they felt intertwined. To loose threads she was desperately trying to cut. I began to watch her. Quietly, I learned her routines. Her mustering errands days. I tracked when the mysterious burner phone would briefly come out of her locked desk drawer before being tucked away again. One Thursday afternoon, she announced she was going to her book club, an elaborate facade she maintained. The perfect opportunity. I waited 20 minutes after she drove away, then got into my car and followed her. The drive was short, predictable. She didn't head toward the upscale area where her supposed friends lived. She drove straight toward a nondescript, modern cafe downtown. The kind of trendy place Veronica usually dismissed as too loud. I parked half a block away and watched. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sudden, powerful rush of adrenaline. She walked in and didn't sit alone. She walked directly to a corner booth where a man was waiting, a man who was entirely too young to be a business associate, a financial advisor, or a distant cousin. He was sleek, charismatic, and when she sat down, he reached across the table and took her hand with a casual intimacy that left no room for doubt. The private meeting. The confirmation hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just a fling. They looked like two people deeply involved in planning a shared future. They laughed. They leaned in close, and at one point, he kissed her palm. A gesture so tender and possessive it made my stomach churn. I spent 10 minutes documenting the entire scene, using my phone's zoom feature to capture every single intimate detail. Photos of the stolen hands, the secretive conversation, the obvious planning. The secret account, I now realized, was their getaway fund. I drove home immediately, my mind racing. The affair was the weapon, the obvious, undeniable betrayal. But it still didn't explain the college application. Why destroy my future if she was planning to leave my father anyway? That night, after my father went to bed and Veronica was downstairs fielding a suspiciously long, hushed call on her landline, I went into her home office. I knew the specific, antique writing desk she kept locked. I didn't need to pick the lock. Veronica, in her arrogance, was too meticulous to realize she was messy. I remembered watching her grab something out of the top drawer one day, and I noticed the key was kept hidden, not under the desk, but taped inside the back of the drawer below it. A cheap hiding spot, but perfect for someone who thought she was infallible. My heart hammered against my ribs. I inserted the key, turned it, and the drawer slid open with a heavy thud. Inside, there were bank statements, property deeds, and a thick, official-looking folder labeled My Future. I flipped through financial ledgers detailing the massive sums she and the other man were funneling into an offshore account. It was clear. She was draining our family assets, slowly, meticulously, right under my father's nose. She wasn't just cheating, she was committing financial ruin. And then, at the very bottom, tucked beneath a stack of old utility bills, I found it. It was an envelope, identical to the one I had received from Beaumont, but this one was slightly thicker. I pulled out the contents. It wasn't the rejection letter I had memorized. It was a formal document, dated weeks before my financial aid was denied. The headline was unmistakable. Conditional grant and scholarship acceptance. The Beaumont Institute. I was approved. I was funded. Then I saw the attached FAFSA correction form. This wasn't the form my father and the accountant had submitted. This one, submitted by Veronica, listed a completely fabricated, inflated salary and understated assets, effectively eliminating my need-based aid. The note attached stated the change was made due to last-minute portfolio adjustments. She had not only intercepted the initial approval, but she had knowingly, criminally, altered the financial forms, ensuring I would be categorized as a full-pay student, a burden, so crushing my father would have no choice but to force me to stay home. It wasn't an accident near the fern. It wasn't an innocent mistake with the filing. It was a cold, calculated act of deliberate sabotage. She didn't want the inconvenience of having a stepdaughter at a prestigious school halfway across the country, distracting my father or pulling resources away from her grand exit plan with her lover. The betrayal was no longer just a rumor or a feeling, it was paper and ink. I stood there, the evidence of two profound betrayals in my hands, the emotional treason against my father, and the methodical destruction of my future. The years of subtle slights, the condescension, the accidents, they all made perfect, sickening sense now. Veronica was a viper, and she had stolen everything that mattered to me, but now, she had given me the ammunition. I carefully photographed everything, the offshore account ledgers, the pictures of her with the man, and most importantly, the original Beaumont letter next to her forged FAFSA correction. I put all the evidence back exactly as I found it. The fear was gone. In its place was a quiet, ice-cold certainty. Veronica had played her hand, believing her perfect facade would hold. Now, it was my turn to play mine. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but for me, it wasn't about heat or cold. It was about precision. When I walked out of Veronica's office that night, I was no longer a hurt, disenfranchised daughter. I was an architect of justice, the shock of the discovery of the affair, the secret accounts, and the undeniable proof that she had killed my mother's dream and my future gave way to a laser-like focus. I wouldn't rush this. I wouldn't give her a chance to twist the narrative, to play the innocent victim, or to charm my father out of his senses. Veronica dealt in facades. I needed to expose the very framework of her deception. The next few weeks were the hardest performance of my life. I had to live under the same roof as the woman who had tried to ruin me, acting as if nothing was wrong. I was polite, distant, and utterly unremarkable. Every time she offered me a fake saccharine smile, a little piece of ice formed around my heart. My father, oblivious to the fact that his wife was draining his retirement and his daughter was conducting a private investigation, was busy and distracted. This only made my task easier. I began phase 1. The documentation. The photos I took that night weren't enough. They were digital evidence, easily deleted or disputed. I needed physical proof that my father could hold in his hand and never forget. I purchased a high-quality portable scanner. Over several nights, waiting until Veronica was absolutely, undeniably a sleeper, on one of her late-night phone calls with her lover, I returned to the locked drawer. I carefully scanned every page. The detailed account transfers, the photos of her and the man, and the crown jewel, the original Beaumont financial aid approval, juxtaposed with her fraudulent FAFSA correction form. I printed 2 complete binder-clipped sets of evidence. One set was sealed and placed in a safety deposit box outside the house, my insurance policy. The second was organized for presentation. I labeled them simply, documentation. This meticulous work gave me back my control. It wasn't about yelling or confrontation. It was about facts. Then came phase 2. The scenario. I needed the moment of exposure to be unassailable. It couldn't be a screaming match in the hallway. It needed to happen in a context where my father was settled, calm, and forced to look, without the distraction of a fight. I chose the Sunday evening family dinner. My father always cherished that meal. It was the one time of the week he let his guard down. I needed Veronica to be present, relaxed, and utterly unprepared for the shift in the atmosphere. I started subtle preparation. I suggested that we use the nice china, the one my mother used to love. For the first time in months, Veronica, always eager to play the role of the perfect hostess, happily agreed. The plan was simple, clinical, and devastating. I would not accuse her. I would simply present the undeniable truth, one piece at a time. I would let the evidence speak the words I was forbidden to speak. In the days leading up to Sunday, I rehearsed the moment in my mind, over and over. I practiced keeping my voice level, my hands steady. My goal wasn't to incite anger, but to achieve clarity. My father didn't deserve a messy breakdown. He deserved the truth delivered with precision. On Saturday, I placed the binder of evidence, hidden beneath a few school textbooks, right next to the dining room chair where I would be sitting. Everything was in place. The table was set with the crisp linen. The meal was prepped. Veronica was completely oblivious, humming a cheerful tune as she discussed her book club's meeting for the next week. I looked at her. basking in her false sense of security. She had gambled my entire future, my dreams, on the assumption that I was a child who would simply retreat and accept defeat. She didn't realize that an artist doesn't just see the world, an artist knows how to observe, how to document, and how to reveal the hidden truth, no matter how ugly. The calm was terrifying, a heavy, silent cloak I wore into the final night. My heart was steady, the planning was complete. Tomorrow, the perfect picture Veronica had painted for my father would be carefully, methodically, ripped to shreds. Sunday dinner arrived. The air felt thick, charged, though only I knew the storm that was about to break. Veronica, glowing and oblivious, complimented the food. My father, tired but content, asked me about my classes at the local university. This was the moment, the final execution of the plan I had spent weeks refining. I waited for the natural pause between courses, looked across the table at Veronica's placid, perfect smile, and then looked at my father, whose trusting eyes still held the faint shadow of past grief. He deserved the truth delivered with clarity, not chaos. I reached for my bag, pulled out the binder, and placed it gently in the center of the table, sliding it towards my father. "Dad," I started, my voice quiet but cutting through the silence of the room. "I know you think I've settled, but I haven't. I've just been doing some research lately, and I found something you need to see." Veronica's smile faltered instantly. Her eyes darted from the binder to my face, and for the first time, I saw Panicraw, ugly and exposed, flash beneath her composure. "What is this, dear?" she asked, her voice too high, too brittle. She reached for the binder, but my father's hand, confused, covered hers. "What is this narrator's name?" he asked me. I met his gaze directly. "It's documentation, Dad, of why I didn't get into Beaumont, and why Veronica has been so eager to make sure I stay close to home." I opened the binder to the first page. The series of magnified photos from the cafe. My father picked up the page. He didn't have to study them long. The intimacy captured in the images was undeniable. The color drained completely from his face, leaving him pale and instantly aged. He looked at Veronica, a profound, silent question in his eyes. Veronica leaped into action, her facade shattering. "That's been manipulated. She's lying, she's jealous, she's trying to ruin me because she's unhappy about her school." I didn't argue. I simply guided my father to the next section. "The financial ledgers, Dad, cross-referenced with your bank statements. Notice the timing of the large, weekly transfers to an account in the Cayman Islands, coned by her, friend." His hands began to tremble. He had always trusted her financial acumen implicitly. The realization that she hadn't just betrayed him emotionally, but financially, struck him visibly deeper. Then came the final devastating proof. I turned the page to the pair of documents. The original Beaumont grant approval letter, signed and dated weeks before my financial aid was denied, lying right beside the FAFSA correction form, the one listing false, inflated family income. "She didn't want the money spent on me, Dad," I explained, my voice finally cracking slightly under the weight of years of silent hurt. "She wanted it saved for her new life. She didn't just let my dream die, she calculated its demise. She didn't just destroy my paperwork, she committed fraud to guarantee I couldn't leave." My father didn't look at the papers anymore. He looked at Veronica. The confusion in his eyes was replaced by a heartbreaking clarity. He saw the cold calculation, the betrayal that ran deeper than passion. He saw that Veronica hadn't brought him stability, she had brought sophisticated deception. Veronica tried one last time, her voice rising to a shriek. "I needed stability. I needed security. You never gave me what I deserved." But the words were useless. She was fighting the inevitable. My father simply pushed the binder back towards the middle of the table, stood up slowly, and looked at Veronica with a devastating absence of emotion. "Get out," he said, his voice low, firm, and final. Now, Veronica, defeated and exposed, gathered her things in a flurry of chaos. She didn't look back. The expensive, pristine sculpture had tumbled off its pedestal and shattered. By the next morning, her perfume was gone, her clothes were gone, and the heavy, chilling atmosphere she had imposed on our house had lifted. The aftermath was painful. My father was broken by the deceit, but now that the poison was gone, the healing could begin. We called the Beaumont Institute, presented the full documentation of the financial fraud, and explained the situation. They were shocked, but understanding, given the proof and the strength of my original application. They agreed to reinstate my conditional aid. I was going to Beaumont. My dream, stolen for months, was finally reclaimed. I learned that day that the most beautiful faces can hide the most calculated hearts. But I also learned something about myself, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the ability to stand quietly in the face of immense injustice and choose truth over despair. I didn't descend to her level of malice. I simply held up a mirror until she saw herself reflected in her own actions. It took a terrible betrayal to remind me that the most important promise I ever made was not just to my mother, but to my own potential. If you felt my story, if you've ever had to fight to reclaim a dream that someone else tried to steal, then don't forget to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to Under Hidden Faces. Because sometimes, the truth hides beneath the calmest faces, and the justice you seek is simply a matter of gathering the evidence.